All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our another edition of our live Q and A with SAC Commissioner Patrick Britz. I'm Christian Stryker. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of the SAC. For those of you who haven't joined us before, I'm seeing some different names that we haven't seen before. Kind of how this works. It's a live question and answer session. As you will send me your questions through the chat feature, and then we'll ask Commissioner Britz. And at that point, let him answer those, and that'll be it. We'll do about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll call it a night. So, Commissioner Britz, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of get us started, and then we've already had a couple questions emailed into us as people come in here. The last few strolling in, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Commissioner.
All right. Thanks, Christian, and good evening, everyone. Appreciate everyone joining. Hope each of you is safe and staying healthy through this. We continue to what I would call it plod along at this point. When this all happened in March, if you would have told me that September we'd still be sort of dealing with this in the same manner, I would have said you were crazy. We'll get through this, but here we are, and unfortunately, it doesn't appear there's any sort of relief from the pandemic as far as it continuing to spread and impact people. So hopefully, we'll be able to figure this out. I did see some good news today that there was an article about the number of high school football games that had been played in several states, and those had not indicated a spike in the community. I'm sure there were some cases here and there within a team or maybe within the community, but the participation of a high school football game did not necessarily equate to huge spikes in the community. So I think there's some hope from that. Obviously, in some of the major colleges that have started to try to play, there have been some issues. Tulsa, Oklahoma State being postponed. I think there was a couple of other games here and there, and obviously the NFL starting tomorrow. So we will continue to see how this goes. The bubble format that the NBA and NHL and MLS sort of did seems to be the most successful model at this point, and something that unfortunately we as a division or as a conference can't really cover the cost of, but we'll try to figure out a way. I don't have much of an update since last time we had this, which was in mid-August. We are still continuing to try to find a path to play the fall sports in the spring. They won't be full schedules by any stretch of the imagination. From a football perspective, you're probably looking at 4 or 5 games with a potential conference championship type setup with a 1-game playoff, maybe a 2-game playoff. Soccer is probably going to be looking at 6 to 7 games with potentially their usual 8-team conference tournament. Volleyball is looking at anywhere from 10 to 12 matches and probably a postseason tournament. For those interested in field hockey, it'll probably be about a 6-game schedule with a postseason tournament. Cross country is still sort of to be determined. A lot of that is going to depend on whether we're able to participate in indoor track or not. And based on conversations I've had around the conference and even around the country, the ability to have any sort of what I would call regular indoor track meet or championship is going to be quite a bit of a challenge right now, given the restrictions on number of individuals that can be in one place in a venue, and just the fact that a lot of the schools or facilities that might host an indoor track meet just don't feel comfortable doing it at this point. So that will be to be determined. But if we don't have an indoor track season, I think it's pretty safe to say that we will have some sort of an abbreviated cross-country season in the early spring, and then focus on trying to have an outdoor track championship in the normal time frame, which would be April. The basketball season is what we're sort of focused on now as far as discussing basketball and the other winter sports. I certainly don't mean to leave them out of it at all. But when you're talking about scheduling, basketball is the biggest animal from that standpoint. So as of right now, we are trying to figure out if we should start the basketball season, which would normally be the second Friday in November. Um, to be honest, I think we've been as transparent as we can during this. To be honest, I don't see that happening. I just don't see any way that we're going to be able to justify playing basketball in November when we didn't feel like it was appropriate to be playing soccer, football, volleyball, etc. in November. So, and also now even Division One is talking about delaying the start of their basketball season to right after Thanksgiving or right before Thanksgiving. So, us starting it in our normal time frame is probably not going to happen, but we're going to continue to monitor that, and we hope to make a decision on that in the next couple of weeks. Part of the reason we're sort of hung up on this is as a division, in particular as a commissioners group, we have approached the NCAA governance structure, and we're seeing if there's any way that we can delay the start of the NCAA championships in both men's and women's basketball. Instead of starting somewhere around March 13, maybe they start around March 28. So give us a couple of extra weeks um, to play. We haven't gotten any sort of definitive answer on that yet. I don't know when we are. We're sort of trying to push the envelope to make a decision sooner rather than later. But if we did get that relief, then I think it would be a lot more comfortable for us to start right after the first of the year. Allow the schools to finish the fall semester intact, which obviously is the number one goal right now. Those that have started in person, want them to continue in person and try to make it through that Thanksgiving break, and then not necessarily have to bring students back to participate in a handful of basketball games, and then start back up again in early January. So maybe they could bring them back shortly after the Christmas holiday, prepare for about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, and then start the season. And that would give us 2 extra weeks to finish the basketball season, while also not disrupting the current schedule of spring championships. Um, so once we get that determined, then I think we will be able to start putting together the matrix, which is going to be a spring schedule, which will start sometime in January, go all the way through the end of April, maybe even leak into the first part of May, trying to coordinate, all the fall sports in addition to the winter and the spring sports. And we've been in conversation, obviously, with our schools. We're going to do our best to try to limit the crunch on their staffs, whether it be athletic training, facility management, sports information, etc. Understanding that, having 5 or 6 events on campus on one day is a little bit of a challenge in a non-pandemic situation, let alone when you're trying to work around social distancing, testing, and screening expectations. So that's where we are right now. Not much more to add when it comes to that, but please know that all of us, not only just here in the conference office, but across the entire conference, are trying to figure out a way that we can play in the spring and make it as meaningful as we can for our student athletes, while also not, I don't mean this, while not killing our staffs, which really we potentially could, not, that would be metaphorically, but just doing that, trying to put so much on them, trying to make this happen all in the spring. So before I open it up to the questions, I did want to show off our newest gear here that we've got. So we're going to be wearing these as much as we can around the towns. How close you can see that there? I'll turn it a little closer. There you go. logoed up for us. So our staff has some, and we're going to be giving them out to some of the people in the conference as well. I'll have to talk to our reigning apparel guru, Amelia, if she wants to try to sell these, but it's something we could also talk about for sure. So, Christian, with that, I'll stop and see if anyone has any specific questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner Britz, and thanks for being the model for those masks. We needed that.
Yeah. I don't look good without a mask. With a mask, even worse.
We did have two questions that were emailed in earlier from Todd, and so I'm going to ask the first one. As we start seeing more games being played across the country, whether it's limited fans or no fans, what is the conversation that has been had within the SAC about having limited fans available at both indoor and outdoor venues when we do get to play?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that would be our preference, would be to have fans, even if it's limited. A lot of it will depend on where each state is from that standpoint, or local municipality for that matter. And also a lot of it will depend on the comfort level of the institutions. But I mean, to think that, come January 1, this magic switch is going to happen and everything will go back to normal is probably not realistic. But if there's any way, shape, or form that we can have fans in the stands for these contests, we will make it happen. And I know our schools will work hard to make it happen. But there's no guarantee on it. But know that that is that's our goal. We'd love to have that if we could.
Fantastic. And his second part of this question was, what is the SAC doing, or will the SAC do to enhance video streaming for those fans that can't make it to games?
That's a very good question. That's one we talked about early on in this process, probably 2-3 months ago, when we first started chatting about even trying to play in the fall without fans. Is that we've got to do our best to have video streaming. We started our digital network last year, and it worked great. Just unfortunate the timing that our second year, where I think we were going to see some pretty big improvements, the pandemic hits. But we did purchase, every one of our schools has a software package that we've encouraged them to use, and Christians showed them how to use it, which will help enhance the broadcast. But to be honest, I mean, we're going to do what we can. The challenge is going to be, if you're hosting multiple events on one day at different sites on a campus, there's just only so much our schools can manage. And, so if one game is being broadcast and it's a pretty regular broadcast with announcers and things, graphics, but another one is just a camera at midfield or midcourt where you can just sort of see and maybe hear the PA announcer, then, I think as long as we're trying to be equitable with that, as long as it's not the same sport every time getting that, I think that's the best we're going to do. But please know that those conversations have been had, and our schools are going to work hard, and we as a conference are going to work hard, in particular at our championships, to have quality streaming, knowing that fans either won't be allowed or may not feel comfortable attending in person.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I can just add to that, we just had a media relations meeting earlier this week, and that it talked about extensively that every school wants to do their best to, whether it's live stats or live video, to make sure that fans know what's going on at games. So they're going to do their best to make sure it happens. Right now, hi, I just got a question. There we go. Sam Hyman. Could you ultimately see certain sports compete in the spring and others not? Or is it going to be an all or nothing type situation?
Well, I mean, I definitely think preference is going to be given to the spring sports, in particular based on what happened to their seasons last year. But there's an interest and a strong desire for the winter and fall sports to also be played. I know some conferences have already started discussing potentially not playing anything in the fall for various reasons. I'm sorry, playing any fall sports in the spring for various reasons. But through coaches meetings, administrative meetings, presidential meetings, that hasn't resonated with us. There is a strong desire to try to play these fall sports in the spring term. Um, but again, I think if push comes to shove, given the fact that the fall sports were not impacted at all in 2019-20, that I think preference would be given to the spring sports, and I think that's why you've seen, I said that even if we are able to play the fall sports in the spring, they're going to be very limited schedules to allow the spring sports more of an opportunity. But also, to be fair, is it realistic for our fall sports to be playing a full season, February, March, April, and then turn around 4 or 5 months later and play another full season? So we've got to think about that from a health and safety perspective, non-COVID related health and safety perspective.
That's great. Thank you. We actually have one from Jeremy Harrison, kind of falls right in line with this. Do you anticipate this affecting spring sports and having adequate field availabilities, specifically for lacrosse?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I said, if push comes to shove, I think the spring sports will be given preference of that. I would have a hard time seeing a situation where a lacrosse game is not played, so that a soccer or a field hockey game could be. That's not my decision ultimately, but given the conversations we've had as a league the last few months, that seems to be the direction that most people would go. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a facility crunch. I mean, for sure, especially those outdoor sports that are shared. We have a couple of schools that play both soccers, both lacrosses, and football all on one field, and trying to manage that is going to be a challenge. But if you sit back and think about it, and okay, there's only two, potentially two, maybe three home football games, three, maybe four home soccer games, it becomes a little more manageable than to think that you're going to be playing six home football games or five, and then 8 or 9 soccer games on both genders. So, I think it can be done, but we're all gonna have to be creative, and that's why when we figure out exactly when the start of basketball is going to be, and when some of these other spring sports, fall sports, could potentially start and end in the spring, we're gonna do our best here in the conference office to put together a schedule that everyone can handle on their own campus, understanding games could be moved if the schools want to do it.
Thank you, sir. This question is from Kevin Mays. Obviously, everything is up in the air at this point, but with all 3 seasons, fall, winter, and spring, all kind of scheduled to cross over each other, is there a discussion to try and stagger the seasons across the months between January and May?
Yes, there is. That's a great question. And yeah, certainly those are the discussions. The hard part is, as much as we'd like to stagger some, especially the outdoor sports, trying to play football or soccer in January or February in some of the locales of our institutions is going to be a bit of a challenge. So, as neatly as you'd like to have that, okay, we can get soccer done by the end of February. We can get volleyball done by, end of March or whatever. It sometimes isn't going to work out due to facility use and also weather. The other thing, from a volleyball perspective, we have a handful of schools that have beach volleyball, and a lot of the student athletes that play the traditional volleyball also play beach. So I think the volleyball coaches would prefer that we get done with volleyball sooner rather than later, to allow those student athletes to excuse me, then participate in their beach season. So, but to answer your question, yes, we're going to try to stagger those as much as we can. And the one thing I can tell you that we are definitely going to try to do, if at all possible, is stagger the championships. We certainly, the last weekend of April, we already have both lacrosses, baseball, softball, all on that weekend. So realistically, can we fit another one or even two on that weekend? Probably not. So we're definitely going to have to stagger the championship side of things.
Thank you, sir. This is actually kind of just a clarification. B. Clark asked, what is the timeline for the final decision on winter sports?
You know, as I said before, we're trying to push the NCAA to make a decision on the championship side of things. They met today, and I heard from my intel that it sort of got kicked down the road again on that. But from our perspective, we really can't go past the end of September before making a decision. So I would think in the next couple of weeks, we've got to make the call on whether we try to play basketball in November, December, or if we just wait until after the first of the year.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Jeremy Harrison had another one. Do you see this situation causing us to have more interconference, just conference games and not many games outside of the conference due to travel risks and restrictions?
I think certainly from a fall sports perspective, that's where we are. We're going to have our own, sort of abbreviated conference season. And there might be an interest in some sports or some schools to play additional games for whatever reason outside the league. From a spring sports perspective, as of now, I think we're going to try to have a normal schedule where you would have out of conference games. Now, the NCAA maximums that were adjusted, which seems like years ago, but it was actually just a couple of months ago, will eliminate some of those non-conference opportunities. So for in lacrosse, we have 10. You got to play 10 games, all conference games. And then, I think you've got 3 or 4 opportunities for non-conference after that, maybe 2. I can't remember the exact number, but there's been no discussion, at least from a spring sports perspective at this point, of eliminating those. But understanding with the new maximums, the opportunities aren't as great as they used to be.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Britz. You've actually caught up on all the questions now. So does anybody else have any questions for Commissioner Britz? Anything at all? Oh, I got one more. Jason Savage, do you have a Venmo or PayPal account so we can get Commissioner Britz a new microphone?
I need a new computer. I need to turn my computer in and get the audio. Something's screwed up with the audio, so I apologize for that. But at least he didn't ask me about being Mayor Vaughn and Jaws like he threatened to do last time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. We did have one more serious question, though, here, and this will probably be our last one. So this is from Todd. Have schools reported their COVID cases? And are certain schools that have more cases than others? And would this affect the school's ability to have a sports team?
Interesting question. Because we're not competing, we haven't gotten into the reporting of cases at this point. Obviously, I think our schools have had cases on their campuses, both athletically related and non-athletically related. But at this point, we are not. There hasn't been a league mandate to report those cases. Once we start competing against one another, I'm sure that will be a part of it. I think that's going to be part of our protocol to share that information, in particular with your upcoming opponents and your most immediate previous opponents.
Fantastic. And I will throw one more in there. This one's from Kevin Mays. How much pressure is there on the conference with playing all sports, given that many states, high school associations, and some NCAA conferences are playing without incidents of COVID yet?
That's a very fair question. To be honest, we haven't gotten any right now. But I think if that continues, Kevin, once we get past this fall semester and into the spring, I think there will be that. It, the I'm going to try not to get political in this, but the biggest issue is all the conflicting information that everyone's getting and the false positives and the false negatives from a testing standpoint. So, while you'd like to think that everything that you see and read is accurate, we just don't know if it is. So, our these high schools and these other schools that are trying to compete and actually competing, are they really not having any serious cases, or are they just hiding it? Or, have all of us sort of been duped and not competing? I just don't know the answer anymore. And, but I can tell you that we will continue to try to do everything we can. And when I say everything, I mean everything we can to participate in the spring. Um, and, I don't think we're alone in that. I think every Division 1, 2, and 3 conference is going to try to do that. Um, and we're just hopeful that, we can live with this thing. It's not going away. So we've got to figure out how we can coexist with this virus and get back to some sort of normalcy when it comes to participating in athletics. It's crazy because my kids this week, between the three of them, we've got 9 soccer games that they're going to be playing in. So, it can be done. It's just a matter of, how much of a risk you're willing to take, I think, and what your protocols are. So, we're definitely going to try to figure it out. And, Jason, you'll love this. I may be back here in December saying, we will be in business in January. And if we are, then that's great. But, this thing keeps changing daily, weekly, monthly. So, we'll just keep our eye on it and keep trying to find a path to play.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, I am going to stop us there. Thank you, Commissioner Britz, for taking the time to do this, and thank you to everybody for joining us. We will continue these series. I think it's good. Everybody seems to enjoy them. As always, thanks for watching and joining us again tonight. Commissioner Britz, any final words?
Nope. Just stay healthy and safe, everyone. And for those of you who have kids in school and working it out, just keep going. We've got to figure out. I saw something the other day that I really liked. It said we got to get kids in rooms and not Zooms, and I think it's accurate. We've got to figure this out, and like I said before, we got to coexist with it. So wear your masks, stay safe, wash your hands, and um, try to live your life. That's my closing comment.
There you go. Well, again, everybody, thanks for joining us tonight, and we will see you again on our next call in another month or so. Thank you.
Thanks.